everyone, my name is Monica Hope and welcome to Recognize Bias and Leverage Differences. The premise of this module is that it would be an online prerequisite to an off-site leadership face-to-face meeting. And that face-to-face meeting would build upon the module contents by dedicating time to really work together in a collaborative way to pull apart the topic and to discuss it as a group. They would do role plays, brainstorm new strategy planning policies, and hopefully implement the Leveraging Differences framework to the organization as a standard, and that standard in terms of changing both the hiring practices as well as to support the employees who are already in the organization. What we're looking at right now is the landing page. This is where the learner would start. They would presumably get the link and be brought here, and they would click on Join the Course. So let's take a look at the course. So here we are. This is the introduction page, and this is the page where the learner gets to see what the content is, what the lesson is comprised of, when there's lists of videos and reflection questions and articles and short quizzes, and each of the lessons also end with a learning or a couple of learning activities. The course objective is listed here, as well as the learning outcomes. Hopefully after the learner takes this module, they will be able to have achieved these outcomes and then bring this knowledge and topic area and hopefully some new expertise to the face-to-face leadership meeting and work together to move forward and change some of the organization's standards. So here we are at the lessons piece of the module, starting with leveraging differences, how to create value. This is really the introductory lesson to the whole concept, the whole format that the rest of the lessons really build upon. The next is leveraging differences versus diversity management, solutions to supporting differences, what is bias, what is generational bias, and then lastly, take the implicit bias test. These lessons were organized to build up the Bloom's taxonomy, starting with knowledge, and then moving right up to comprehension, application, analysis, and synthesis. One of the more challenging aspects of using the ADDIE model for this particular topic really is identifying and validating and qualifying the need for this lesson. Diversity, inequity, bias, these are topics that it really kind of live in a very gray area in terms of how do we establish that we really need this, or what I really found from my research was how do we need yet another one of these. And so this entire course is really predicated around the premise that leveraging differences is very different than managing diversity. And that's why this would be needed. And that's why the skills and the skill sets that would be created through this course would be actually needed as opposed to creating maybe a policy change. So that in terms of implementing and going through the creation from an ADDIE perspective, really that was really the most challenging aspect of this. So here we are in the first lesson, leveraging differences and how differences can create value. And it begins really by setting up what the objectives are and what the learner should be able to do after this lesson. It goes straight then into a question to help the learner start accessing prior knowledge. And then the content is presented by this presenter, Dr. Martin Davidson, who really is the originator of the Leveraging Differences methodology. And his work is really interlaced throughout this whole module. Let's take a moment to hear what he has to say.
And the issue or the label that I use is leveraging difference. And I use the phrase leveraging difference instead of diversity for a very explicit reason, because I'm trying to make a contrast between how we normally think about diversity and what I believe are the approaches that will really make diversity come to life in organizations. So let me take a few minutes just to give you the basic distinction, or to lay out a different framework, a different paradigm for you when I talk about leveraging difference. And what I want to do is I want to contrast it with an approach to diversity, which I'll call managing diversity. Looking at the slide here, you can see a real comparison of the two.
So as we see, Dr. Davidson takes us through managing diversity as opposed to leveraging difference, and that framework and the principles, particularly the 4 principles that are behind that methodology. So the learner, after listening to that video, I think it's about 14 minutes, and then they would go to a reflection question that would hopefully help them piece together a little bit more the concept. They would go on to a quiz that hopefully will solidify their new knowledge, and then lastly they would do an assessment of a couple of activities. It would start off with identifying the purpose of these activities, the objectives of the activities, and then the activities, and there are 3 of them after that. So that would be the first lesson within this module. The second lesson in this module is to continue a little bit more or expand on the introduction of the framework and the paradigm. It starts off again with, at the end of this lesson, you will be able to. It takes you through a quick recap again to stimulate prior knowledge and making sure that the new concepts are being built. So in this case, it's asking some questions in terms of what the advantages are and making sure that the learner has identified the 4 very specific principles. The next is a reflection. It's asking the learner to think of a scenario in which they can apply the new knowledge that they have. And they have more kind of the prompt here in terms of some of the larger concepts. So that would help them in really thinking and doing their reflection. The next piece of it is an article. The article is from Dr. Davidson's book, and it talks a little bit about some best practices in terms of how companies did do a great job at implementing this model, and companies that may have not done the greatest job. And he offers some suggestions in terms of best practices. Again, we have a quiz, then we have an assessment. The assessment again gives the overview, the purpose, the objectives, and then there are 3 activities. The way the students take these activities is that this is connected to a Google Doc. Only because of the interest in time, I was not able to figure out a way to link this assessment directly within the module. So if this module were to be given now, or utilized now in the format that it's in, the premise would be that the learner would go and to the pre-formatted Google Doc, and they would put in their activities in there, and then they would post those activities to this space. They would post a link to those activities. There is a much more elegant way of doing that. I just haven't figured it out yet. So third lesson within this module, again, the learner right up front understands what they should be able to do. The next thing that happens is the theory of intersectionality is introduced to the learner. There's a brief kind of example in terms of how intersectionality applies. Basically, we're moving away from the Dr. Davidson pieces and more into generalized pieces that would really look at bias and how some groups experience inequity as opposed to others, and how that affects our workplace. And so this particular page really helps the learner take a look at how intersectionality affects all of us in one way or another, since we all have identities within certain groups. And so hopefully the learner will start laying the groundwork in terms of understanding from their own individual perspective why the leveraging differences model is the model that makes the most sense in terms of sincerely trying to improve the diversity aspect in the workforce. And not just improve it, but actually sustain it. And the best way to sustain it is to help everyone really get touched by the fact that this is a phenomenon that affects everybody from a differences perspective. And so we move through here and go into another video. I really enjoyed this video. I'll play a quick piece for you.
Whenever you bring up diversity, people's hearts tend to sink a little bit. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to have a lecture. I'm going to have to sit through slides like this with multicultural hands in the air. People of different races holding hands, giving each other high fives, holding each other, maybe holding the world, holding the globe up. When we talk about diversity, we tend to do so in a really unimaginative, stock standard kind of way. And that's because people don't really want to talk about diversity. They don't want to talk about diversity in the workplace. It's just a problem that needs to be solved so that you can get on to other things.
So I wanted to include that short clip just because I can't tell you how many images I had to take out after seeing that particular piece of the video, images that had hands and hands holding up the world, and just as she said. So I got a kick out of that and thought I might share it. So also we go on, there is more reflection in terms of what we learned from both her video and the exploration into intersectionality. There is an article that helps the learner start to identify best practices, again expanding on Dr. Davidson's work, but really with very specific ways of implementing new strategies and policies that learners can go ahead and get started with. This format again follows just as the others do. It goes right into a quiz. It goes into an assessment, and then that would be the end of this particular lesson. So the last lesson in this module is specific to generational bias and how there are 4 generations currently in our workplace, and some of the issues that come around with not acknowledging that diversity of thought is just as important as diversity from a demographic, the typical racial gender inequity. Here's a quick video.
A quick, right to the point answer, no back and forth email. I have a hard time adapting to sending emails, so sometimes my bosses get a little frustrated, but I'm a millennial. I check social media probably like 50 or 60 times a day. I mean, that's pretty serious, but yes, I would.
The ones that are in Gen X and then the baby boomers, they're a little bit more, don't want to be in the spotlight, where millennials like to be praised and they like that constant feedback.
I don't know about like not reading it entirely, but like definitely like skimming
it. Great.
You're saying I wasted 4 hours?
So we see here through this video, hopefully, that there are some things to take into consideration when you're integrating a team that could be at least 4 different generations, and how each one of those generations have differences within them, that it's really important that from an implementing perspective, that certain strategies are created to do that. So this lesson really is about how to where to go or what to do for those strategies and to become more familiar with them. One of the things that I wanted to talk about also in this module is the collaborative space here. As you can see over here, there aren't any names here, but presumably those who would be taking this module prior to the offsite leadership meeting would be able to check in and be online, and so they would be able to see who else from their team is also taking these courses, And if they had questions or they just wanted to say, hi, I'm taking this too, what lesson are you on? That's just another way of really kind of creating a team environment. And I think it's a really wonderful, useful thing that has been incorporated into this platform. Just a quick look more on generational differences. There is this wonderful template that I found that really takes apart what it means to be a traditionalist, a baby boomer, Gen X, or millennials. So hopefully those who would be attending the offsite would really familiarize themselves with this template and this material. So when they do get in a group, in a face-to-face, not only are they discussing some of the things, the new knowledge that they gained, but also they have some of this documentation to really have the ability to craft and implement strategies going forward. So this concludes the lessons in this module. This is the space where the learners would be encouraged to take the Project Implicit Harvard University test. This is to have the chance to uncover your own bias. We all have biases created from our culture and media and things that we are not even aware of. And so hopefully the leaders that will be going to this offsite will take a moment to integrate what they've just learned through these lessons, and then some of the unconscious biases that they may have that could be interfering in sourcing candidates or hiring candidates or managing their employees on a team. So thank you so much for hanging in there. This was a really long video, and I very much enjoyed learning with all of you in this course. Take care and have a great spring and summer.